Liverpool? Is that what I'm supposed to do? I'm from Interconnect IT, and we're a small web development company that specialises in publishing solutions. So we design, build, and manage websites for people like The Telegraph, Spectator, Centaur Media Group, and various other publishers like Informer. And there are 11 of us, and we've been going about 8 years now, but we're growing, and we decided that recently that we needed a pension fund. So that's how I ended up here. So I think that's all. See you then.
Okay. Yeah? Right. Hi, I'm Valerie Allen. I'm from General Welding Supplies. I'm the commercial director. My job basically is to do everything HR, health and safety, quality, so that it fits within my role to sort the pension schemes out. We've had a pension scheme for 30 years, so I'm in a little bit different position than these two people with me. We supply welding equipment to industry, from the man who fixes your car in a garage up to nuclear decommissioning, so it's quite a varied range. And it basically says what it does what it says on the tin. We supply welding equipment. So that's General Welding Supplies.
Purdy, introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, my name's Purdy. I'm Financial Controller at Nails Inc. Nails Inc. is known as the UK's leading fashion brand for fashion-forward colours, innovative and professional products. We currently retail in over 50 stores in the UK, seeing more than 10,000 customers a week. In terms of globally, we are in a lot of prestigious department stores like Harvey Nichols and Selfridges. We also retail across Sephora, Macy's and Nordstrom in the USA, and in Europe and Brazil, Mexico and Southeast Asia. We have global sales of around 22 million, and that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Start. Now, David, if I start with you, could you give us an idea of your awareness of auto-enrolment before you actually undertook this process?
I had some awareness because we're in the Federation of Small Businesses, and I just get the newsletters every month, and I have a very quick scan through and throw it in the bin. But I do at least. I had some idea that there was something happening, but also just because we'd reached the size where we started to need to think about having a pension scheme as a legal obligation. So in about November 2012, we actually just started the process of looking at pension schemes, and that's when we fully understood the impact of auto-enrolment.
Right, okay. I mean, Val, was it similar for you? But
well, different position. We've been going for 30 years, so we've had several pension schemes over the years, and we've always paid in 3% of the salary into them. I've got a group personal pension scheme, and also we've got a personal pension scheme as well. So it's my pension advisor came to me and said, neither of these two are going to be fit for auto-enrolment, so we need to start thinking about it. So that's what we're doing, starting to think about the auto-enrolment side of it.
Right. Was it a clean slate for you as well, Purdy?
Yeah, we didn't have a pension scheme in place, but we were probably made aware of it about 18 months before we enrolled. So it gave me time to budget for it, but I didn't really look into it in any detail until about 3 months before we were due to stage. Okay,
yeah, the long finger, which is quite often going to be the case. But, I mean, how did you go about determining what you were going to have to look at?
When I started looking into auto-enrolment, I realised that there was quite a large rate of opt-outs. And the way that we're structured, our salaries aren't annual, they're flexed with the business. So at Christmas, you'll earn a lot more money than you might do in January when your hours are pulled back. So I was very aware of the fact that people would move between lots of different categories, and therefore they would be auto-enrolled but then drop into a category where they don't need to be, and they might opt out. So my main concern was to ensure that it was such a good benefit that we wouldn't have that huge dropout rate.
Interesting. David, you wouldn't have had an advisor, I take it, already on board. So how did you go about finding out what you needed to know, apart from throwing the newsletters in the bin?
I mean, for us it helps a little. I used to work in payroll systems before I started out, so I kind of understood really how pensions work and are structured, and I've also worked in finance. So, it wasn't that tricky. It was just a case of finding the best scheme, really. And because we were aware of auto-enrolment, we kind of wanted to beat our staging dates well in the future, but we thought we may as well get an auto-enrolling scheme into the company early, and that actually threw up a few issues. But,
Right, now, Val, you already had stuff in place, so
Yeah.
what were the key challenges you faced? Because your advisors had come back to you and said it's not good enough.
Yeah, the
So-
advisors told us that neither of the schemes support auto-enrolment, so I've actually contacted the schemes to ask them if they could be adapted so that they could support it. And basically they've said it's up to me to find out whether they do support or not. So it's a little bit of a minefield at the moment. So I'm seeking more advice to find out just exactly if we can continue with these schemes. It would be great if we could, because I don't really want to have 3 pension schemes running at the same time. We don't auto-enroll until April 2017, but I think it's important to be ahead of the game so that it doesn't catch you out at the last minute. So, a bit difficult, really.
Yes, and Purdy, what about you? What are key challenges for you in your...
I actually found it quite easy and smooth. As soon as I knew exactly what I wanted to get out of the scheme, in terms of cutting down the admin, so fewer opt-outs would mean less admin. I then just got recommendations from our bank, from our auditors, and I Googled providers of auto-enrolment schemes and then just met as many as I could. Checked with them what kind of timeframes we required to be able to stage, knowing that I only had a few months, and then just picked the one that I thought gave the best benefits to the business, but also the easiest admin.
Right, we'll come back to those few months in a minute. And David, you were in a good position because you understood systems, which is more than many people do that go into this kind of situation. What about you? What were the key challenges you faced?
nothing too significant. It's just about being organised.
Well, it's nice to know it's easy for a smaller business as well.
I mean, the key thing is just be organised. Have a folio or folder or something where you keep all your notes. We do it on. We use just some software to keep the notes into, basically, and you just get all the information you can. Create a little spreadsheet to compare rates and costs and so on of the different schemes. And you just make the phone calls. Finding people sometimes to speak to is harder than you might think, and not everyone wants to deal with small company pensions, and finding one that had a similar ethical base to ourselves was a little bit of a challenge sometimes. It's not just, Google doesn't have all the answers, unfortunately.
So you came up against that kind of capacity constraint in the industry that people have been talking about?
Well, yeah, some were just too busy. One scheme that looked quite nice was Nest, but that's kind of more a semi-state thing, I believe. But they effectively said, we'll talk to you when you get to your staging date, but not before. So that was immediately off. And then it was a case of filtering through it and just keep talking to different people and then see who had the best offers.
Val, you're going through the process of trying to work out what's going to be right for your organisation, but have you started approaching lots of other people?
Yeah,
Are you using any advisors to maybe help you do that, filter out some of the noise?
I've got advisors to help me do that, but I think it's important that you don't leave it till the last minute as well, because you can imagine by April 2017 everybody's going to have to do it, so you need to be ahead of the game and find the right scheme for you. So I've really started looking at it seriously now because I can see it creeping up on me.
Okay. And Purdy, you said something very similar there in that you're going out, but did you come up against any of these companies that said they were too busy to help you, or were you in the sweet spot because you only had a very short amount of time, so they were able to accommodate you?
It was actually the opposite. We were told that they would prefer people who had more time rather than less time. So where you were told, wait until we get to the staging date, I was told, you should have come to us a year ago. So you have to be quite persuasive to make them do things in a shorter time frame. But it was all done, and it wasn't too much of a headache.
How did you persuade them? It wasn't just piles of money, I take it?
No, not at all. I just think that it's maybe overcomplicated because it's pension schemes and people think they're very complicated and they don't understand them, whereas actually it's quite a simple, I thought it was quite a simple task. As long as all of your payroll documents are in order and they're all compliant, there isn't really that much work to do.
That's because you're a smaller company.
Perhaps.
I'm sure there are people twitching in the audience. I can't quite see it because of the lights, but I'm sure you didn't have that experience yourself.
We also didn't have a pension to start off with, so
no, it always helps
could.
when you've got that kind of low level of benchmark, absolutely. Okay, David, now, I'm interested in that you actually went out to the market a long time before you were required to, because you had perhaps some experience of installing systems and knew that these things don't happen overnight. Can you tell us a bit more about who not necessarily names, but who else you spoke to and what the kind of attitude was to you being so early?
Who did we speak to? I think we spoke to, is it Scottish Widows?
You don't have to name any names, but just to kind of...
Well, we made the calls, and I mean, you say experience of implementing these, but interesting, as a small company, everything that I learned implementing things in large corporates wasn't going to apply. And in fact, one of the things that I think saved us a lot of grief as well is we've effectively outsourced all our accounting, payroll, and so on is with an accounting company. So we just talked to them and we said, look, we're going to implement a pension scheme. Are there any issues that we should be aware of? They said, nothing really, just find the best price, really. Just talk to them, and then they'll sort out the actual merging it into the payroll system. So it was just a case of, it really was just a case of making phone calls and waiting for people to get back. Some didn't, some did. And eventually, I think we had a few meetings, and from that we could make a decision. It wasn't, I don't know.
Well, it's refreshing to hear that it's perhaps not as complicated as many fear it might be.
I think it's one of those things, once you just start doing it, you realise, before you actually start and actually look at the problem, it's like a lot of things, isn't it? Before you actually look at and understand the problem, it can feel a bit daunting. Because I know, how does it work? What do I have to, is the paperwork I have to set up? And then once you get down to it, it's really about setting a few dates in your calendar, and a few little reminders, but they're not major tasks. And you can give everyone that opt-out email once a year. It's just a calendar entry. You don't need to do anything amazing.
I think some people might disagree with that, but we'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to open the floor for questions shortly. Does anybody would like to ask questions of my guests? Stick your hands up in a second, and we'll get a mic over to you. Val, I understand you had an interesting experience when looking for assistance and guidance, when you spoke to one organisation you thought would be best placed to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, well, if you think about the pension schemes that we've had over the years, I mean, my staff are just glaze over when I talk about pensions to them, because they remember the Crown became Windsor, or the Windsor became Crown, and Scotprov became Phoenix. There's lots of pension schemes that we've had over the years, so they tend to glaze over. It's about talking to the pension schemes and trying to find out, the information. And basically, I just got a letter back saying you're going to have to sort it yourself. So it wasn't really very helpful. But I do need to get back to them and say, I really do need some help here. I need you to help me and tell me, is it fit for purpose? And I think, these two guys are in a completely different situation to me, because it must be great to come in without a pension scheme to set one up, because it sounds really simple. But when you've already got one that's been running for, a number of years, we're in a good position where we've always paid into our pension pot. So the cost of it isn't really going to affect the business, because we've always done it. It's just trying to make sure that the schemes we've got fit with the new criteria. And that's the problem for me.
Now, Purdy, are you the only one that's actually pressed the go button on this now?
I believe so.
Yes.
Oh, you have as
You
well?
have as well, yes. Yeah. Okay, fine. So I'll just go through you first, Purdy, about how you think you're going to be managing this process on an ongoing basis, because that's when sometimes the administration starts to become a bit more onerous.
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been relatively simple. We've outsourced a lot of the work to our provider. So everything's already set up. We've only had one opt-out. So in terms of sending the email out after 3 years to automatically enroll them back in, we've only got one person. I guess my concern now will be when we get to Christmas and everyone's pay skyrockets, a lot more people will be enrolled who might then want to opt out in January, which would then cause an admin nightmare. But at the moment, it's all been very smooth sailing. I think I knew that I was going to have to spend a lot of time on it, and if I was going to invest time, I wanted to make sure it was as beneficial to our employees as possible. And I think the key to that is knowing your staff and knowing the business, so you know what they would find a benefit and what they'd actually want to opt into, or if they're automatically opted into something, what would keep them there.
What about you, David? How do you think you're going to be managing it on an ongoing basis?
For us, it's probably quite, we're a simpler company. I mean, I know Purdy's is quite complex contractually. Almost everyone in our company has 30 or more hours contracts, and everyone opted in. So the only time the question comes is when somebody starts, and but then we have a million other things to think about when somebody starts as well. So it's just one more thing on the list. It's not been that bad. And when we actually staged, well, we're supposed to be staging in 2016, but when we decided to do it, it was this May. So we started in May 2014. And somebody from Now Pensions just came in, did the talk, explained everything to everybody, saved me having to do it. It was quite, so on that side of things, it was all quite pleasant and everybody understood. But when we have new starters, I have to think about what do I tell them actually, and I probably need to create some kind of introductory pack for the pension scheme, or just ask maybe. Now have been very good, so maybe I can just ask them and say, can you tell them? Let's try. We're hoping to start somebody soon. So.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Val, assuming that you may not have to change, have you identified how you'll proceed with your existing scheme?
Yeah. As I say, we do it as a matter of course anyway. We always we sort of auto-enroll people within the business. They're on a 3-month trial, and then they're allowed to go into the pension scheme, so that's not a problem. I think it's the cost of the opt-out and re-opt-in to a small company. If after 3 years they've opted out, I have to auto-enroll them again, and then they have to opt out. So I don't know what the cost of that's going to be on an admin side. So like you, hopefully everybody will be in it and stay in it, and we won't have that nightmare. So.
But you fear it could be quite high for a smaller business, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple now who are not in the pension scheme. They've chosen not to be in it. So I can see possibly there are going to be a couple of stumbling blocks with existing employees who've never been in the pension scheme, and suddenly they're being told that, you know, they've got to be opted in to opt out if they want to opt out. So, and I can't influence that process at all. It's entirely up to them. So I can't give any advice on whether they should or they shouldn't, really. So I can see a couple might not want to do it, but
yeah,
we've got that anyway.
Understood.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for my guest? Could I get the mic to that gentleman up there? We'll come to you in just a second, sir. Yes, sir, front row.
Graham Simons, plan sponsor. Questions to David, Val and Purdy. Just wondered what thought you have of the larger organisations tend to have, they tend to benefit from having HR directors or having heads of pensions or even heads of reward that will handle auto-enrolment. Wondered if you had any comments about the importance of being able to make sure that you ensure that the right person handles this, so that it's not, say, an administration manager that potentially doesn't have the skills to be able to deal with this. And also, I wondered if I could get your comments on some IOD research that said that they thought auto-enrollment was a good idea but badly administered. So, what you think, if there's one piece of advice, one piece of support that you could get from government, so from the pensions minister, to support smaller organisations through this, what would it be? How could the pensions minister help you guys through this process? Because it seems as though you guys haven't had the easy, well, not the easy ride, but it hasn't been as easy for you guys as maybe it's been for the larger organisations.
What do you think to that? Who'd like to come back first? Purdy, go ahead.
In terms of who should be running the auto-enrolment, most small companies, I'm a financial controller, but I don't just do management accounts and budgets and corporation tax. I also do insurance and legal and trademarking and health and safety and repairs and maintenance. So in a small company, I think people are used to having a really broad range within their role. And if you're organised enough to cope with all of those different elements, they're normally the right person to also do your pensions. Payroll also falls onto me, so it was a no-brainer that I was going to do the pension. So I wouldn't ever give it to somebody who just had an admin role, who might not have any idea about the structure of the company and what would be involved in it. You need to give it to someone who's already quite clued up on the business.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, I'm exactly the same as you. I do everything on the commercial side, so it's the insurance, you know, the corporation tax, the whole lot. So it's me that it falls down to sort out the pension. And as I say, it's such a complicated matter as well to give it to somebody else. You'd have to have them trained up in how to run a pension. So as a small company, we can't do that. So again, it falls to me. And one piece of advice, I think the websites are great, but sometimes they're a little bit difficult to navigate. I've tried to find out whether the schemes do support auto-enrolment, and it's very difficult to find out whether they do or not. You seem to sort of go around in a circle, so a little bit more clarity on the websites, really.
Thanks for the sales pitch for me, Val. Yeah, we can help with it. But more seriously, I think it's similar. It's all the same. But I think it's often a matter of scale. But it is true as as a director of a very small company, it's an 11-man company and lady. You are director and general dogs body. You do a wide range of tasks. And that's just part of what it is to run a small firm. And the regulatory load tends to build up as you get bigger. So what you have to do as a small firm is nothing like what you have to do as a FTSE 100 listed company that has all sorts of control systems that have to be in place just to be listed, let alone to conform to state requirements. So I've worked in 150,000 companies, strong companies, and now I have a 11-strong company. And it is actually very different. It is far less complex. I do say there's a lot to be said for being a member of an association that provides distilled snippets of information. That's, joining the FSB has been just useful to keep an open eye on things. I don't necessarily follow everything, but I get enough alert that I've got some awareness in my head, and I don't know, it takes a little bit of the stress and pressure off. And you can always call them. They often have these advice services that you can just ring up, just ask for a little bit of help. So we're in the FSB. There's probably others. There's chambers of commerce and so on. And I think all small businesses benefit from being something like that. I don't think it should necessarily fall onto the government too much, except that they make it part of the problem. They are part of the problem. They create the problem, but it's not. At the same time, it's down to the industry to help and to make things as clear as possible. Like Purdy says, the websites could be clearer. You have to remember that you're talking to lay people that don't necessarily know a thing about pensions. It's amazing how few people, if you just talk to somebody in the street, doesn't know what a pension scheme really is, or how an annuity works, or anything like that. It's completely opaque.
That's an interesting point.
Do you get industry or government websites? Industry or government websites in terms of where
It's the industry websites need to be a little bit more clearer, yeah.
Okay. Yes, you're right there. The point about engagement and communication is interesting. We already know how hard it is to try and communicate with members, and yet trying to approach smaller businesses. Perhaps some people forget that they have no more knowledge of these things than some of the members that we're already communicating with. The gentleman up there with the yellow tie, I think, is next, mic 3.
Thank you. Question to all the panel. It's Jamie Fireash from the People's Pension. If there was one thing that you could change for the whole enrolment process or how the scheme was provided, what would it be? Bit of a loaded question, but
I just want to hope that you're going to say you're going to move to him as a provider, perhaps. But David, let's start with you.
Well, actually, one area that it all went a little bit leery was with the provider. The key contact that we had. He made one mistake, but he left. But he didn't set an out of office or there was no information that he'd left, so we were emailing and not hearing anything back. So I think a sort of centralised system or case management systems would help just the providers to improve their communications and just ensure a bit more smoothness of implementation. It wasn't a disaster, but it did. There was a period when we thought, well, we're due to start, but nobody's talking to us. So it was only a few phone calls later that it got fixed.
Thanks, Val.
I think clarity really is, and like you say, is about talking in layman's terms as well to people so that they understand just exactly what's required of them. It is a very complicated matter. I've been doing it for years and I still don't fully understand it, so I don't know what chance anybody else has got. So I think just clarity and make it simple.
For me personally, I don't think there's anything I'd change, but actually we really benefited from having a dedicated person within our pensions provider who dealt with me. So when we had to put all the reports together, they were all bespoke and completely defined for our business, for our needs, for our payrolls. And she was super, super helpful, always on hand, really responsive. So actually I wouldn't have wanted to go into a call centre, into a general pool of people who had a general grasp. It actually really benefited us to have a dedicated person, and we've been enrolled now for 10 months and we still have the same manager.
Yeah.
Obviously, if she left, we'd really hope that she passed all the
That was
information
the
on and
problem,
there was
yeah.
a good handover there.
It was otherwise, apart from that, which could have been down to that individual. We don't know. Maybe that's why he left.
Do you have any other questions from the floor? None? Sorry, gentleman at the front and one at the back as well. I'll take the gentleman at the front. If you could tell us who you are, we'd be grateful.
Richard Wilson from NAPF. Two parts to the question. Firstly, did anyone have any trouble with their payroll providers or making sure they got the right data to the scheme in terms of the two employers who've gone through auto-enrolment? Because I know that can sometimes be a bit of an issue, and not all the payroll providers have been quite up to scratch when it came to auto-enrolment. And secondly, what was the reaction of employees? Were people generally, in your firms, were they generally supportive? Did they want extra information, or did you just use the standard communications you got from the pension provider, or did you do anything sort of extra as an employer to try and explain or reassure people about what was happening?
Let's take them separately, because they're both really good points. Let's start off with payroll. Let's come to you, David, first, because you are the techie here. So, how did you find that?
Well, like I say, we don't manage our payroll. We get that handled by the accountants. So we get a report, I believe. Actually, I don't handle that part, but I believe we get a monthly report, which just we send to the accountants, who then they do what they have to do. No real.
So far, so good.
Very
as far as you're
straightforward.
concerned. Okay, Val.
We've
Data.
we've got Sage Payroll, which we do in-house, and we've always deducted the pension, sorted that out, so it's not a problem at all. The admin side of it and the payroll side is not a problem to us. We've always done it.
Okay, Purdy.
Our payroll is also outsourced, so I spoke to them before I chose a provider. We get really, really good detailed CSV reports every month. So when we picked the provider, I asked them what they needed, sent them the reports we currently get so we could tailor it to fit what the providers wanted. And it's all gone really, really well. Again, our payroll providers had a technical guy on hand specifically just for us for our first month, so we could make sure that all the reports were syncing correctly and they were running through the systems. So it was all quite simple and easy, but I guess it just needed a little bit of foresight, because you couldn't say to your payroll company 2 days before payroll's running, oh, I need this special report for my pensions. Can you do it for me now? You need to give them a little bit more notice than that.
That's fair enough. Now, on the point about reaction from employees, we'll start with you, Purdy, because you only had one opt-out to date. So sounds like it was positive, but what did you hear from employees about the implementation of auto-enrolment?
It was a really, really positive reaction. I think all the girls were really happy that they were getting this benefit. And when I was talking to all the different providers, there are some who charge the employees quite a lot, like all the monthly charges fall on them.
Right.
And if you're a relatively low earner, you're losing almost all of your pension pot for the monthly fees. So we've tried to find one that wouldn't actually penalise the employees for joining the scheme, but at the same time was beneficial financially for the company. So I think because it was such a good benefit, we gave them all the collateral that came from the pensions company, but also our sort of provider that does all the reports for us also have a lot of really good communication that is literally in layman's terms. They get email communications when they opt in. If their statuses change, they get annual communications, and it's really simple for people who are completely unfinancial. There's been one opt-out. At the beginning, there were quite a few phone calls. What's this deduction on my... Because they'd obviously had the collateral, but they maybe hadn't read it all. So in the first couple of months, there were probably a lot of calls just asking what these deductions were in their salaries. But once it was all explained to them, they were very happy. And like I said, one opted out of about 175 people. So it's not bad.
Very good. Yeah, David, smaller company, but how was the reaction?
It was positive. I gave everyone an initial just chat about what pension schemes actually are and how they work, just so that they understood. Of course, since then, legislation's changed. You can now take your whole fund out if you want afterwards, so that changes some of the thoughts on it. But yeah, everyone. I was actually surprised that we had 100% sign up. Even I signed up. So. I decided it. Yeah, why not? It's painless.
Good, good. I mean, Val, you're on the road to doing this. So, have you had any kind of feedback from your employees yet?
Most of my employees are in a scheme anyway,
Right.
and I've always encouraged them to do so because they get 3% of their salary from the company that they wouldn't get if they went in a pension scheme, so I've always encouraged them to do so. And as I say, there's only been a couple who've never wanted to be in the pension. But now I've got young apprentices coming through and they really want to be in a pension, so I think things are changing. People realise that being in a pension is a really good thing for the future, so quite positive reaction from my staff about it.
Fantastic. Thanks for your questions. I hope that covered everything. There was a gentleman at the back. I can't see where he was. Just there. Okay, please, let's have your question.
Actually, it's a lady,
I'm
Angie
sorry.
Venegat from Kuhn & Nagel. I've got two questions, one for all three of you. Did you access the relevant government websites that relate to auto-enrolment? And then, if so, did you find it useful? And for Val, as you have two pension schemes already, did you use an advisor to take out those schemes initially? And if so, have you been back to them to see if they can help?
Thank you. Do you want to start with that one and then we'll go over the schemes?
I have been back to them. I have been advised that they don't fit the auto-enrolment, but when I went to my MD and told him, he said, well, I want that in writing. I want to see that they actually won't. So if we have to go down the route of having another pension scheme, I want to make sure it's right. So that's why I contacted them direct, and I got this, well, it's up to you to decide or not. So now I need to go back to the advisor and do that. So.
Is your advisor independent or is it a provider of the pension scheme?
It's an independent.
It's an independent?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's, okay, good. What about the use of, I mean, you've mentioned industry websites, but I mean, government ones, you've already suggested that lacks a human touch.
Yeah, I
perhaps.
think the government one is especially looking to when you need to auto-enroll, I think that's really, really helpful. And like you said, it actually gives you a plan as well. So you have a plan of when you need to start doing things, and you can put it into your Outlook calendar as well, so it actually informs you. So I think that website's really useful. I think it's when you're going into the pension providers' websites to actually find out about schemes, that's a little bit difficult, but the government one was great. I've got a plan already, so
good.
It's in my Outlook.
And David, you've got a different view of websites, obviously. You probably, there's some technical reasons why they're probably not up to scratch as far as you're concerned, but how did you find them?
It was mostly fine. There wasn't... Like I say, things could be... there's a lot to be said for simple language and good searchability and good indexing, but there's not... Yeah, it wasn't... I mean, the government website was looked at. It's quite findable, so you just go through it and you have your staging dates according... I think, is it according to company size, or is it... yeah. So because we're small, it's way in the future, but... Like I say, it's not fixed. So, but no, there's nothing too scary about it. But that's us. It might be different for somebody else. Having a look at that content, I don't know. I mean, I do know we've got small clients and we've got big clients, and I do know some of the small clients really struggle with concepts outside of their core business. So we've got an interior decorator. She's great at interior decorating, but anything you talk to her about, she's quite lost. And the same goes for a hairdresser. He's a really smart hairdresser, but when it comes to I know I had a discussion about maternity leave, and he was completely wrong about it, about how it loads the company, and it's nothing like as bad as he thought it was. But he'd never really done the maths, so he had no idea. He just saw numbers and checks, so he got thrown by it.
My accountant tells me about people that he has on the books that literally present shoeboxes full of paper
Yeah,
still.
yeah,
So I mean,
exactly.
if it's not their core competence, you could understand
Yeah.
them not being
So-
so engaged with it.
Yeah, and a lot of small firms are like that. They're not that competent. They're never going to become big companies. They're always going to be limited by that. And they're the ones that are going to struggle, I think, the most. It's the small firms with high staff turnover. I can see that being a problem. So yeah, a hair salon, for example, is going to have a lot more trouble, I think, than a software company like ours, which is quite organised and doesn't have a high turnover. Everything's quite organised.
Yeah. Now, Purdy, I mean, how did you find the site? So clearly, there wasn't enough, perhaps, of a hurry up as far as you were concerned to make sure you perhaps did it slightly earlier than you actually did it in the end. But
I think I knew absolutely nothing about pensions really before I started doing this, so I found the site quite useful just to give me, when I looked at 18 months earlier, to give me an idea of how I needed to budget for it to make sure that it was all accounted for. And then in terms of delving a little bit deeper and looking at the detail, I found it straightforward. It was relatively simple. And then obviously when I spoke to people who specialise in auto-enrolments, they then gave me the detail that I then, I guess, needed to be able to make a decision. But I think the website's pretty solid, just to give you a rough idea of what you need to do and how to be compliant and timescales, I guess, for how long it will take. I actually think they give you more time than you need.
oh, wow. That could be a controversial statement. Thank you very much for your question. Do we have somebody else at the back there then? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Chris Hitchin. Can I just say it's really great to hear the three of you embracing auto-enrollment with an element of enthusiasm. Patrick, I would agree with you. It's really potentially quite a profound change in the social infrastructure of this country. We're at the stage where more and more employers are being brought in and are looking forward to coming in. There will, of course, be future contribution increases down the line. And I think looking at it from the other end, what's needed to provide a decent level of income in retirement, well, Pensions Quality Mark would say minimum 5% on each side, employee and employer. And I think Steve Webb's coming along later, and he would probably admit that there may be future government moves to actually increase the levels of contributions under auto-enrolment beyond what's currently envisaged. At what stage does your enthusiasm start to dim as that ratchet gets tightened, and will you end up having to think very carefully about to what extent the pay bill has to take the strain?
Thank you, Chris. That's a good question. Purdy, how about that?
Well,
When does it start to bite?
to be honest, I'm not sure. I was given quite a lot of good advice in terms of how to structure it, so that I didn't want the employees to bear the brunt of the cost of the admin side. However, it had to be financially viable for us, and we are quite a small company. So we were given a lot of advice from the pension company about how to structure it through payroll, salary sacrifice, that kind of thing, where they would get the benefit and the tax benefits, and we get the employer NI benefits. So in terms of the actual cost to the company, it almost levels out. I suppose if it is 5% and 5%, it is going to be a much more significant increase, and it's going to be a bigger hit to our bottom line. But I think easily up to 3%, it's not going to make a significant impact.
Okay. Val, what do you think? How do you think that'll
Well,
pan out for you?
we've always paid 3%, and the employee pays 3% as well, although they can increase their contribution if they want to. I don't think it's going to be that big a problem, because it's been 3% forever, really, so it's not gone up like everything else has. So I think there is room for movement there to go to a slightly higher level, not massive, but there is room for movement, I think, from a company point of view.
Yeah. David, what about yourself?
We'll just charge more. If our costs go up, we charge more. That's as simple as it is. But I think the biggest problem for a lot of firms is rarely, I mean, the payroll cost is always enormous. It's the biggest check you write every month. And there's some months you think, I could just have a BMW instead, but it doesn't, you still have to pay people, unfortunately. But no, I think that the biggest problem for most firms, I think, is hiring people and keeping them. And I think the pension fund is actually a way to help keep people And it helps to hire people as well, especially when, I mean, soon everyone will have a pension scheme, I suppose. But at the moment, I know that we're ahead of some competitors, some small, at least with the small web agencies. Most of them don't have anything in place yet. So we already look a bit more grown up. We can say, hey, you get a pension scheme with company contributions, etc. It's a benefit. And people actually find that attractive, especially younger people, who I think are actually more financially conservative and careful than my generation were.
Does that mean that despite being a smaller company, you are looking perhaps like a more of a whole type of proposition for as an employer than perhaps an equivalent small company down the road that hasn't yet?
I think it is a part of it.
So that's a benefit to the company as well.
Yeah, so you get a benefit. There's a bit of a disadvantage with a little extra workload, a little extra cost, but on the other hand, you've got the benefit. So they balance out. And I think actually you get more benefit by having it and doing it than not. Right. I think.
Thanks for that. That's good. Thanks for the question. That's very good. Any others? We've got a few more minutes before we're going to have to wrap. So there's a lady down here. If you could just wait for the mic. Is there anybody else? There was a race on there. Number 2 won it.
Sian Lee, Scottish Power. First of all, I think it's really heartening to hear what excellent member engagement you seem to have had, particularly Purdy with only 1 opt-out. It's fantastic. My question was, have you, any of you given consideration to where you go from here in terms of member engagement, in terms of the long term? And, will you have different contribution structures available in the future? And do you see part of your role as being to educate members and help them understand how to ensure they have enough for retirement? For example, is what they're contributing now going to mean that they have a reasonable income stream when they come to retirement? Just what are your thoughts on that?
Quite a lot in there, but who wants to take that first?
Yeah, I think the thing is I've always encouraged staff that if they want to put more in, to do that, to save for the future. So some have taken that option. It's been their own decision, but I think it's been a good thing that they have upped their contribution. So I would encourage that if they can. But I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the future and what the pot's going to look like. So we can't really advise anybody as to how much they should put in and what they're going to get out of it at the end of it, because I think it's a bit of a long piece of string that we don't really know what's at the end of it for them.
David, go.
I think, do you still call them AVCs? Additional voluntary contributions? Yeah, we have a couple of people who've taken that up, and we match, I believe. I haven't actually checked that. I think we match.
So we can't know everything. We didn't ask you about that to check, so that's okay.
Yeah, so I don't actually administer the pension scheme. I just keep a level eye over everything. But it probably will go up in time. We'll try and do some more things, but it's about balancing it. I think all people should have an understanding of how money works, but that's quite rare. So when people don't, you need to encourage them really to have a pension scheme for when they're older. If they really understand money, they can understand it as part of a balanced portfolio of investments, but that's a different story, and most people don't do that. But we do work to, well, I work at least to educate people in the office on finance, because I think it makes such a difference in your life.
Great. Now, Purdy, you've had an enviable take-up rate. So what's your plans for future engagement?
We try to sell it as much as we can. So when we're interviewing people, we do tell them that it is a great benefit that we're now offering. Again, because we really did try to pick, well, I tried to pick a pension that I would really want to go for, and I thought if I wanted it, the rest of the girls would. So we are selling it as quite a big benefit. In terms of contributions, I don't think we'll scale it up or down for different levels within the company. We're going to keep it blanketed across the business. But we have had quite a few people who have also upped their contributions. Already, yeah. So we've got some people contributing up to 5% already. Wow.
So you've adopted the DWP's campaign of I'm in, and as an example, as a shining light. I believe we've got a question from online that I can't get up on my iPad. So
Yeah, I've got a question from Michelle Hall. I just wondered, did any of these businesses consider contractual enrolment rather than automatic enrolment originally?
who wants to take that first? Any of you?
Well, yeah, I mean, in effect, because we're early, I think it is contractual enrolment.
It didn't scare you off anyway?
No,
No.
nothing to worry about.
Anyone else?
We've already got a pension scheme
Of course you
anyway,
have.
so I don't think that would apply.
And we didn't consider it.
Didn't consider
we
it, no.
knew our staging date, and that's just what we worked towards.
Yeah, 3 months out. That's good. Now, I meant to say thank you for your question before. We have got a couple of minutes left. So, has anyone got a quick question? Have to be a quick one. Otherwise, I've got a question for my guests. No, good. Right. Tell us now, Val. Obviously, you're not quite at that stage yet, but be interested in your views anyway. In the process or the journey you've got to so far, what would you have done differently if you had your time again? That's the kind of a nugget of advice you can pass out to other smaller businesses. How would you have done it something differently?
I think, being ahead of the game. Obviously, we've already had a pension scheme running, so we didn't think it was going to be a problem. Probably trying to get advice a bit sooner. And I think as long as you, like you say, you've got a diary entry of what you need to do and when you need to do it. So it's just keeping ahead of the game, really.
David?
Can I just say ditto?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Pretty much the same situation.
Purdy, you didn't. You did it all in 3 months, but just goes to show how
Yeah, but I'm very
organised you are.
project focused, so
Yeah.
I take on a project at a time and then just give it all of my energy. In terms of something different, this is very specific to our business, but all of our communications are sent out by email.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're not all office-based, most of our 324 staff work in stores, we don't have work emails for them. So I guess something I could have done sooner was adopt electronic pay slips, which meant I would have had all of their email addresses so that the communications could then go out. Because I did have, at the beginning, maybe 30 or 40 communications that came back to me that I then had to try and either post out or email out to them, which was a little bit of additional admin. So I guess, had I had more time, I might have got that information a little bit sooner.
But it's nice to know you weren't perfect. You didn't get everything done first time. I think thanks all very much, everyone, for coming out for the first session, first of all. I think you'll all agree that that's been a rather refreshing and encouraging bit of feedback on the experience of smaller companies on approaching auto-enrolment. That just leaves me to ask you all to thank my guests for their participation. Thanks, everyone. Very good.